A Light in the Darkness Chapter 58, Fan Fiction by Azazyel. There was a weighted silence between me and the Grey Knight that attempted to move me out of the way so they could kill Ellesmere, and even as I felt their psychic might pushing upon my form, my mind, and even my soul to move me from my position. But I remained rooted in place, like a 10,000-year-old tree that had burrowed through the bedrock beneath itself. In a split second, transhuman flesh covered in literal tons of Ceramite Aegis Armour, a specialized protective device mounted on the Power Armour of members of the Grey Knights and Ordo Malleus. Worked into their armour, each Aegis Suit a latticework of art, of psycho-conductive filaments and amulets, wrought into hexagram-mic wards and inscribed with anti-daemonic prayers, made gauntlet met my plain fist. And my plain unadorned fist won that conflict as servos sparked and broke apart in the Grey Knight's arm. My fist shattered the armored fingers of the gauntlet and I could feel beyond the ultra-hard metal breaking under my enhanced body the Grey Knight's flesh and blood hand, pulping within the gauntlet as I punched past his wrist and with an echoing clamor my open palm impacted the Grey Knight's chest. The Grey Knights were beside the Custodes Guard, in my opinion, the greatest warriors the Imperium had to offer, so in that vein, my palm hit the Knight's chest. I detonated my chi to create a small explosion with the impact, so the Grey Knight was launched backward, knocking over his brothers with his multi-ton form. In that split moment, as I sent the Grey Knight flying, I sighed mentally as I knew the time for diplomacy was over. It was a time for blood as the Astartes, especially the Grey Knights, wouldn't ignore some fevered dream from the Emperor. There were only two outcomes to this meeting. Either I went with them, gave up my secrets, and was made into another cog in the Imperium. Or I stood my ground and beat the Grey Knights into disarray. As I summoned my sword from my chest and blocked a rail gun round heading for Ellesmere's head, who was busy bursting into laughter at having fully won the bet, I calmly spoke. Yes, Ellesmere, you were right. We have already been shot at. So go home while I handle this. I said dryly as I briefly considered if bringing Ellesmere, to begin with, was a completely terrible idea, but I knew they would have forced me into leaving for Terra, so conflict would have been inevitable. Don't die, Jake. I would be most wroth if I must break into the warp to retrieve your soul. Ellesmere said with a bit of joking, but it was clear that concern was in her voice, so I smiled before she used the sex wards to teleport away, making the Grey Knights tense at the sight of non-warp-related teleportation. Now, alone with no one in the line of fire that I cared about, I sighed, and as my eyes reopened, they were alight in holy yang fire, and my large saber was filled with the purifying light of the yang flames. I apologize for what is to happen, I whispered, and my voice carried through to their very souls with each step I took toward the 24 Grey Knights cratering the ground like I was a bloodthirster in disguise. He bears the Emperor's light. We shouldn't be. I heard one of the Grey Knights roar before I cut him off as I slashed my sword at them, sending a wave of sword chi at them. The time for talking was over, but as I ran forward to try to first disarm and destroy the weapons of the Grey Knights, my senses screamed at me, and I became a white-hot supernova of pure energy as a dense wave of blue plasma engulfed me in a titanic explosion that sent my form zipping backward and skipping across the melting bedrock off the mountain. Fucking plasma cannons. The guard isn't without their fancy fangs, I see. I grumbled as I got back to my feet and grimaced at the sight of how the guard had already set themselves up in a position to hail my ass with exotic weaponry with several beings in red robes that I recognized as agents of the Adeptus Mechanicus working to calibrate the weaponry as I saw the lost cannons and flamers and the plasma-based weaponry whirl and glow with even more power. Jake Barris, surrender, and you will not be harmed. I heard Lucia order, and I burst into laughter at the cunt's demand. I fucking ate a plasma cannon shot to the face, you flat-chested bitch. Give me your best shot, as you are only taking a carcass home, ha ha ha. I laughed madly as I inhaled the leftover arcing plasma and fire that filled the area, and as my chest expanded to an almost comical size, I filled my lungs with chi, and I returned that plasma bolt with 10 times the love they gave me. A billowing pillar of golden plasma smashed through their lines, and I saw humans, whether they be guard or mechanicus, be reduced to but ashes and slag. But through the smoke a grey-cloaked figure dashed through and slammed its power sword into my own, and transhuman strength and the strength and weight of its armor granted that move victory at that moment. As I wasn't able to get my feet from underneath myself, making me curse as I slid across the ground, and I frantically had to swing my blade in jagged sweeping motions while around, holding in a scream of pain as I sliced apart Eurojet-propelled miniature missiles being perfectly aimed at my joints. But the bolter rounds still exploded after being destroyed, and those bolter rounds were blessed to all hell, making them more effective on a supernatural being like myself. Delving into my cultivation knowledge, I pulled out a spell, and thick, billowing golden yang flames spun around my form, forming a shell in the shape of a massive glowing closed lotus. With each laser and plasma collision with the massive lotus, only making it bigger, before I heard the gunfire being ordered to stop. "My turn," I whispered as I folded my hands together into a magical hand sign to help guide the rampant energies that eclipsed my realm, and the closed lotus made out of roiling flames and other energies began to open itself up with large baseball-sized balls of plasma elegantly flying out of the opening lotus flower. And then, as the balls of flame guided by my thoughts gently flew over to the guard and the grey knights, I flexed my mental will, and all cloud of what looked like seeds violently exploded.